So, you've decided it's time to build a custom calendar for that writing or world building project of yours. Not every setting needs one, but calendars are a fantastic tool for both organization and for exploring our world's cultures. We're going to talk about both, and to help me, I've asked a friend to join us.
Good morning, interweb.
To start, let's discuss the three types of calendars you might use. Solar calendars, like the Gregorian calendar, are based on the planet's position around its star. Solar calendars are great because you can have fixed events and seasons, but they kind of ignore the moon.
Lunar calendars, such as the Islamic calendar, are nice because they're easier to track with a big moon constantly changing phases in the night sky. However, lunar calendars ignore the sun and so have some trouble predicting seasons.
Lunisolar calendars, like the Chinese or Hebrew calendars, track both the sun and the moon. It's their biggest strength and their biggest weakness. They're just a lot.
Like, a lot.
Yeah, lunisolar calendars tend to require intercalary months too, or leap months, such as this 13th month that sometimes occurs in the Hebrew calendar.
Now, to help you choose, consider that solar calendars can work well in regions that experience pronounced seasons. Lunar calendars work well in regions that experience no seasons, like around the equator. And lunisolar calendars, because they track everything, can work well in any region. These aren't hard rules, just general guidelines.
Let's keep it simple and assume we'd like to make a solar calendar, like the Gregorian calendar most of us use today. Let's also assume that we are working with an Earth-like planet with a single moon and a similar orbit.
Good call. So first things first, you'll need your planets and your moon's orbital periods. That is to say, know how long it takes your planet to orbit its star, and how long it takes your moon to orbit its planet. Once you got those, divide the planet's period by the moon's period to get the rough number of months per year. Assuming, of course, months are inspired by the lunar cycle, as they often are, even in solar calendars. Next, divide up your moon's period into weeks. I usually go with either 4 or 8 weeks per month, taking inspiration from the moon's primary or secondary phases. And finally, decide how often you'd like to have leap years. Those years where an additional day is added to the calendar to recalibrate things. Those are important because it's rare that the number of days in your calendar perfectly matches the number of days in a year for your setting. That's why we have a leap day every 4 years in February.
Okay, but what if you do have multiple moons for your setting?
This gets really complicated really fast, so I'd strongly recommend going with no more than 2 moons. An Earth-like planet with multiple moons is already a bit of a stretch. That said, the neat thing about multi-moon systems is that they allow for competing calendars of the same type. So imagine you have 3 cultures, each opting for a lunar calendar. Culture A might decide to track the big moon and ignore the small moon. Culture B might do the reverse, track the small moon, ignore the big moon. Culture C might decide to track both moons. For them, perhaps a month is given by the orbital period of the outer moon, and weeks are given by the phases of the inner moon, which would lead to a sort of leap week scenario. On top of that, think of the cultural and perhaps religious significance of the conjunction of the moons, moon-moon eclipses, and sun-moon-moon eclipses.
Speaking of which, there's still a ton to say about how culture has impacted calendars and the kinds of events one might have. Not nearly enough time to say it all. But for example, the Gregorian calendar's months don't just have random names. Most are based on a god, leader, or some other part of Roman culture. January is aptly named after the god of beginnings and gates, Janus. February is named after Februa, the Roman festival of purification. March is named for Mars, and April is based on the Latin word for to open. May is actually based on a Greek god, Maya. Then you've got Juno, Julius, and Augustus.
And September, October, November, and December are all named after the Roman numbers septem, octo, novem, and decem.
Exactly, because they used to be the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th months, back when there were just 10 months in a year, before the Romans added a few more.
And sometimes there are things that we assume are a given, but vary between calendars. For example, New Year's Day. The Gregorian calendar puts the start of the new year on January 1st, but there's no reason why the start of the year couldn't be May 4th or July 22nd. The Ethiopian solar calendar, for example, places its new year around September 11th or 12th. Also think of culturally important feasts, holidays, remembrance periods, and so on. What does your culture celebrate, when, and why?
D&D's calendar for the Forgotten Realms is a great example of this. It has a recognizable structure, simple math with its 10-day weeks, and a nice bit of flavor with its annual holidays like Midwinter and High Harvest Tide.
Agreed, my only issue is that it's very clearly just our Gregorian calendar, minus decimal points. It's a little too neat for my liking. Personally, I really like the timekeeping in Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars trilogy. The human colonists on Mars basically take the Gregorian calendar and roughly double it to make it fit Mars. 24 months of roughly 28 days. Now, the Martian day is about 39.5 minutes longer than an Earth day. So, at midnight on Mars, all the clocks stop for 39.5 minutes. This time slip period becomes a sort of witching hour where inhibitions are shed and Martianness is celebrated.
Fair point. Perhaps Discworld's calendar is a better example. Or at least a fun one. A year is defined as the time it takes for the disk, the world, to revolve once on the backs of the elephants that carry it. That lasts 800 days, and actually includes 2 of each season, because it's a disk. The sun passes over it and then under it. Though most people just cut the year into 2 agricultural years.
Gotta love a bit of Terry Pratchett.
So in the end, calendar building is kind of a 3-step process. Choose a calendar type, figure out your divisions of time, and consider the cultures. Calendars are weird. They're a numbers game on one end, and just a bunch of speculative world building on the other.
And if anyone is interested in diving deep into the numbers, may I shamelessly plug my channel in general, and my Worldsmith calculator in particular. Could be of some use to folks.
Definitely. The Worldsmith calculator is actually really cool. It's a massive spreadsheet which calculates a lot of the math for you. Things like the local year, months per year, number of intercalary days, and way more. It's a great way to go a bit deeper into all this without having to learn all about astronomy first. So, calendars done?
Calendars done.